Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 134. So glad you could join me. I have a great show for you today. Kashiana Singh is our main guest. She'll be here in just a few minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do it because we love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Leave reviews if you're watching this later on iTunes. Whatever you can do to help spread stuff around the internet, that is what we appreciate because we love poetry here, and I know you do too. Now, like I mentioned, today's guest is Kashiana Singh, but first we're going to talk to today's poet, Tatiana Dolgushina. And here she is, Tatiana. Hello, Tatiana. How you doing?
Hi, Tim. I'm good.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And this was it's been such a trying week for the whole world as we watch what's going on in the Ukraine, and and there were so many poems submitted, and this was one of those poems. I always have like the goosebumps test when a poem sort of makes me get a little shiver of truth sort of dropped on me. That's one of the poems that I know we should publish, and this was one of those poems. And it's the way you start out too. When Americans think about war, they think about men with guns and soldiers in uniforms. That kind of it is how we think about war, but that's not how the world experiences war in a lot of ways. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and how the poem came to be?
Yes, of course. Um, my experience is that I'm a refugee of the Soviet Union collapse in the 1990s, which I feel very, I was a child and I feel very similar to what I'm seeing right now. So there's a lot of feelings that are coming back about the displacement and the loss of home, the loss of family, the loss of country. So it's not just me or my family or others that had to flee back then and what I'm seeing is happening now, but it's also the culture and the country are changing, collapsing. Ukraine is no longer going to be the same as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Russia isn't going to be the same. And it's very similar to what happened in the 90s, where my country, the Soviet Russia, disappeared. One day it just was not there anymore. And that created all kinds of effects. Economy collapsed, violence, gangs, everyone was on their own. It was chaotic, and there was millions of people also left for survival. So there's so much that is happening today that I'm feeling in my bones as to what happened to me and so many others not that long ago. So this isn't just a new thing. This is in our history, in the Soviet and the Slavic people's history, and it goes even beyond that. I mean, the entire Soviet Union was full of human rights violations and horrible, horrible acts of violence against people because of politics.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that you're a bird biologist now, and a poet too, which is always interesting. And you wrote several poems this week, given the events going on. What was it like? How often do you write poetry, and what made you sort of turn to so much poetry at this time? Is that something that you write frequently, or is that something that you don't do that often, and because of what's going on, that you found yourself doing that?
No, I have been writing for a long time. I have an MFA from Oregon State University, and I'm working on a book about my story.
Mm.
And a lot of my poetry I've been writing on this subject of um, of my displacement and my loss, and how I'm healing post immigration journey and post childhood trauma, which is what happened, which is what war is. It's trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been for several years writing specifically on the topic of this thing that happened to me as a child. So I was a child, and I'm trying to process what all happened, what exactly happened then when I was 7, 8, 9, 4, 5 years old, because a child experiences the world differently and war differently. So what I'm seeing now, all those photos of children on trains and buses on foot fleeing their home, I feel what is going to happen to them. I feel that forever, from today and forever, they will feel displaced. They will feel forever a foreigner and forever missing, either missing themselves and or missing parts inside of them. And that is truly has been very triggering and horrible about what's happening now, and being able to like witness it through media, like photos and videos, and the news, is that I know those children, they haven't lived life just like I didn't live life when all that happened in the 90s. And so their new world concept or life concept is war.
Mm-hmm.
This is the default, the base of everything from now on, how they will see life. And it's so unjust and it's so unfair.
Mm-hmm.
And it is all because political games.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the most touching and sad photographs I saw was one of the teachers teaching, on the floor in the subway with the elementary students around, and it's just heartbreaking to think about. And the poem captures so well your experience and helps us understand what it was like to live through that. So thank you for sharing it. Do you want to go ahead and read it?
Yes, actually, let me pull it up here. I don't have it. Just a second. Okay. When war makes a child. When Americans think about war, they think about men with guns and soldiers in uniforms. When I think about war, I think about packing suitcases. I think about food shortages. I think about the economic collapse. I think about my grandmother, the one we had to leave behind. The one whose mother moved her from town to town until they didn't see a war anymore. The one who was left an orphan in the middle of Siberia with her 13-year-old sister to take care of her. When I think about war, I think about the cold walls of apartment buildings. I think about no heat in the house. I think about hotel rooms. I think about having to learn a new language in order to survive. When I think about war, I think about being a child and standing on the coast of an ocean, where the wind blows just enough to make one paranoid, just enough to feel like war is right around the corner, right around and behind you, touching you.
Yeah, Tatiana, thanks so much for sharing that poem with everybody. It's just such that ending especially is so moving. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us and for writing that poem.
Thank you, Tim. It's an honor to be able to share my work and have others feel what I'm feeling and what many others are feeling.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to have you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So we're going to go to a quick break, and then we're going to get to our main guest, Kashiana Singh. So sit tight, and I will put on a little bit of music, and we will be right back. And we're back. Thanks for your patience as we get to Kashiana Singh. Kashiana is a management professional by job classification and a work practitioner by personal preference. Kashiana's TEDx talk was dedicated to work as worship. Her poetry collection, Shelling Peanuts and Stringing Words, presents her voice as a participant and an observer. Kashiana's latest full-length collection, Woman by the Door, is a knitted collage of poems rooted in lived experiences and saturated with the poet's varied sensibilities and influences. Her poems have been published on various platforms, including Poets Reading the News, Visual Verse, Oddball Magazine, Rattle number 73, Poets Respond as well, and elsewhere. Kashiana lives in Chicago and carries her various geopolitical homes within her poetry. And I forgot to ask you this before, Kashiana. So hello to you, first of all.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Yeah, so I think you moved to North Carolina, right? So I should.
Yes, I
okay.
did. That's okay, right? I carry Chicago within me, so it's perfectly all right.
Well, I have the I just grabbed the bios from people's websites, and I put North Carolina underneath you on the screen, so people know where you are.
Perfect. I'm actually calling in from Boston right now.
Oh, are
so
you?
It doesn't matter.
See, so normally I check with people before, and when we did a little practice call, I forgot to ask you. So you're not actually in it. So we're deceiving the world by saying you're in North Carolina, but that's okay.
Exactly.
So how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me. And what a poem that was. Tatiana's poem was just stunning.
Yeah, it's amazing. The number of poems and the quality are just amazing about over the last week. It feels a lot like the pandemic start era where we were getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of poems for Poets Respond. And there's so much good stuff because people turn to poetry in the in times of need and when things are difficult, we turn to poetry. So it's nice to see that, and really great art comes out of tragedy. It really does, which we maybe talk about later as your work for Poets Reading the News. But for now, let's start out with a poem. What do you want to read first?
Hard to choose, but I'm going to go with the poem on page 5. And it's called In My Nani's House, Curds and Whey Were a Religion. I'll put it up here. Give me a minute. You have it, Tim?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. This is from the first section of the book. It's one of the first few poems, and I'll go ahead and read it, and we'll talk about anything that you have later. In My Nani's House, Curds and Whey Were a Religion is the title of the poem. Rendered warm, the milk in homage to perfect temperature, every drop just enough, dripping a muted prayer on Nani's wrist. Stately, it would reside on the dining table in a glazed terracotta pot, its tenderness an immaculate gospel. Spoonful smooth like rays of moon, an attentive healing of my acidic chest, kindness revealed after rested nights. Persisting in pause at patience in my Nani's house, sallow in its maturing, whisked tidily into incubation. The ritual of curd making harnessed my attention for precision and process for transformation. An unveiling of the delectable aphrodisiac on alabaster mornings, always a ceremony. I have failed to assemble curd like that. Mine settles in watery mouthfuls of regret. It tastes hollow like an afterthought, forgetting to tighten its surface muscles. It collects into itself, refusing to be real curd, metamorphosized. I have tried so much to do what Nani did, but the curd I make always looks like half-fulfilled wishes, as if it is telling me to have more patience, wants me to breathe in, breathe out, and stir the silence. The chewy curd I assemble is reluctant, uncondensed, unlike the metabolic grace in my Nani's house. Sometimes I wish I had stood beside her more often, watched her more closely, her eyes an emblem of Agni, Akash and expanse in her arms. I wish I knew then that she was Prithvi, holding hostage an intoxication. I wish I had gathered stillness. I wish I had surrendered my questions to making of curd. There she is, looking at me sideways, sari pallu sweeping to her waist, a shining plait, pomegranate lips, curds and whey in my Nani's house.
Yeah, that was in my nanny's house. Curds and whey were a religion, from Woman by the Door, the new book by Kashiana Singh. So that poem sort of hits, really, it's a great poem to start with because it hits on the central theme of the book. And I think all of your work, there's a way that you seem to be focused on a philosophy, like poetry is a vehicle for your philosophy on life, is maybe what I'm kind of sensing from reading your work and looking at what you've done. And that philosophy is of making, I don't know, there's a way that poetry itself sort of translates the mundane into the sacred. And there's and that's what you seem to be talking about most is how you have a TED talk, which is really interesting to watch, about work is worship, and bringing worship into our daily lives and the regular things that we do seems to be really central to your thinking. Can you talk a little bit about that and what inspired the book and how it came to be?
You're awesome. I'm amazed you landed, zeroed in on that. Of course you are, right? You read and do thousands of poems, but yes, you're right. This particular poem, obviously, right, at the surface, you can call it a memory poem, right? You can call it a kitchen poem. You can call it a poem about relationships, of course. But two things, and I'll come to your point about work as worship, is I am also very thoughtful about the fact that Kashiana, I'm a fusion of all my sensibilities and geographies. The language and the words and the content I bring to my page comes from all the places that I have directly or indirectly been influenced by. And that could be words, it could be language, it could be content, it could be curds and whey coming to the table. And I don't want to be apologetic about that, but actually lean into that. So that's one. Yes, the answer to your point about sacred, spiritual, I am personally not a religious person, but I'm a person of strong faith and spiritual leaning because of the belief in the higher power of the universe. I was surprised, Tim, you and I are both editors, and all the editing, one of the first things you do when you edit a book is to check which word is repeated, right, multiple times. And actually, I just realized a couple of days ago that the word prayer gets repeated throughout the book, like maybe 15, 16 times. And that never came through in the editing that I did or somebody, because probably it was so inherent to the spirit of what that poem was saying. And yes, work is worship, and the TED Talk is there. And of course, I don't want to be dismissive about things like work-life balance that people have to find or maintain, but I believe and want to live through my poetry and otherwise the mantra of if you can find moments and not the capital H happiness, but the small h happiness that comes through moments of worship in your day-to-day.
So how do you come to poetry? Is it something I saw you recently moved to the United States from India, and you have an interesting background. So how is it that poetry came to be a central part of your life?
That's always a hard question, right? It's hard to say it was at that point in time that I decided that now poetry is going to be central. I know it is central. I know it helps ground and anchor me, whether it's through transitions, whether it's through different places and movements or transitions of your body and soul. But poetry has been a part of, so first of all, culturally, the oral tradition is really strong, right? We grow up listening to poetry in an oral form, right? The story of gods and goddesses, Ramayana, Mahabharata, the Sikh Granth, actually, which is the community I belong to, is just poetry. It is a conglomeration of poets that different saints and gurus put together. So part one, you grow up with that. So it's almost organically, you're speaking, learning, hearing poetry around you in some shape, manner, and form. Formally, I started writing early, like I hear many of the other poets state. And I was introduced to the oral. My dad was very fond of reading or reciting, as you used to call it earlier. And Casablanca and Oh Captain, My Captain are the two poems I still remember by heart, because he instilled it and distilled it in us in terms of learning and repeating it. And then, of course, not unlike many others, I had a teacher in middle school who kind of saw all of that and then made sure she honed that craft, and I started writing and publishing, etc. So that's the story. And I do think both my dad, the oral tradition, but also that particular teacher played a very strong role.
Well, let's hear another poem. But first, there's some clicking on the line. I think the your microphone is picking up some kind of static, maybe. Do you want to try possibly unplugging and just using the speakers on your...
Yep, let me try.
Yeah. Can we still hear you?
How's this going?
That's better. Yeah, I think that's going to be better. The sound quality is not as high without the microphone, but the clicking was a lot of clicking. So
okay, I'll take off the microphone and try and see if anything. All right, is this good, Tim?
Yeah, I think. Let's see. I'm trying to decide what's better. Is the sound quality is a little lower, but
Let me try the microphone again and adjust the position of the phone a little, and tell me
maybe that.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Okay.
Is this better?
Yeah, the sound is much better with a microphone. It's just I think there's some static where it hangs or something. But anyway, I don't want to distract you though during the whole show. Yeah. But yeah, now it's good if you I guess keep
I'll
it.
try and hold it a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry for the trouble.
No problem.
But anyway, do you want to read the next poem?
Yes, I will go into the next poem. I think I will read a poem which is on page 21. It's called Love Poem for All My Women. I'm pulling it up here. I'll jump in. Actually, before I jump in, it is Love Poem for All My Women. The title of the book is Woman at the Door. It could be a woman at the door. It could be the different images and the different roles we assume, the different avatars we assume over our lifetime at the door. But it also could be the many shapes, sizes of women around me. So that's really what this poem goes to as well. I'll jump in. Love Poem for All My Women. She spoke through her handicraft of crocheted moments, stitching distances. She comforted ghosts of growing arcs, fears gathered into her paisley shawls. She tasted for us in small bites which her fingers broke into unaware mouths. She wove pearls, starlight into blankets that covered our fevers, craved warmth. She held our whispers inside the silent sun and lulled them to sleep in a hush. She tidied our glances and our mess in unison with her tiptoed manners. She adequately measured moon dust in ample spoonfuls of unlikely herbs. She embellished marooned memories, a feather stitch piercing into their hems. She made the night listen to chorus of infinite conversations between us. She claimed our faults like they were hers, painting them into silk scarves. She grew our habits in precise ways, trimming rough edges as of hedges. She journaled in a cursive so curiously alive on a page, making constellations. She became Shiva and his consort too. If needed, she would awaken a thunder. She practiced mindfulness of single words, collecting Shukar, Shukar, Shukar. She is my equinox, balance brimming with all seasons. I hold my axes in her.
And that was a love poem for all my women. Again, from Woman by the Door, Kashiana Singh's newest book. And so that's another poem that's just exemplar of the way that the book operates, which is sort of praising. They're a book of praise poems. It feels like too, like praising moments and praising people and in our hand in it. How much of that is intentional? Is that I don't know. I was looking back. I was looking at your work and some of the interviews you've done and things like that. And somewhere you said, and I couldn't find it again, and I didn't write it down at the time, but there was something where it felt like you were very consciously using poetry as a vehicle for I can't remember exactly what you said. I wish I could, but there's a way that you're using poetry as a tool to share something intentional more than sort of most poets seem to be, engaging with the world through poetry in the sort of an organic way. It seems like it was very conscious, the choices you're making. So can you explain why you made those choices?
And I like to call poetry, and I know you often have mentioned that as well, as a problem-solving tool, right? Which is fine, but the difference may be, I don't think it's about the solution to the problem that I'm looking and bringing poetry. It's the process of writing the poem and what you're going to do with that. And and the word problem is not literal, right? It could be, to your point, it could be a relationship, it could be a moment, it could be a situation, it could be a transition, it could be loss, grief, etc. What you do with it through that poem is where I think the poem becomes the vehicle to transform that moment into something bigger and broader. And of course, also the other thing, which since you mentioned consciously, is the personal and the objective and the universal. I am very conscious of that. And I said that earlier, this poem had words like shukar, shukar, shukar. Shukar is nothing but gratitude, right? Tandav. And Tandav is nothing but what Shiva does when he's angry with what's going on. And so I think the usage of words like that, and hopefully, people who read go and find and get deeper into those concepts that may arrive on the page in the form of a word. That's what I'm trying to do. Obviously, there's never perfection in poetry, and it's a journey, right? So
yeah. Well, let's hear another poem. Next up was, well, what do you want to do next? You can pick.
Yeah, let me go to. Let me change a little. Let me go to, let's go to Just a Process After All. It's on page 72.
Okay.
Bring it up. And the book, you probably mentioned it, Tim, is divided into 3 sections. The first section is apertures. The second is portals, and the third is detours. And we're reading poems from all the sections, but each of them kind of transition and then come back full arc to the front. The first section is memory, childhood, a few praise poems about people. The second section is transition, growth as an individual, more surreal a little bit. And then there's poems of loss, grief, and almost full circle back to the beginning of the book. But just wanted to mention that. I'll jump into the poem. And this one, I'll caveat, I have not read this poem out loud before. And it is, you'll understand why I might have an emotional reaction to it, so bear with me if I do. Just a process after all. The hustle of the 5 days after you, they prescribe 10 to 30 days of mourning, the completion of mandatory actions like curdled milk, ghee, oil lamps, candles, pristine sheets, tilted tears, jasmine-filled condolences, food, and guests. Your hands placed in the position of prayer at the floor as the floor was sprinkled with water. Purification, release, rebirth. Meanwhile, a forgotten notebook still open at your desk, your baritone voice barely gathered inside the cold walls of an urn. Cannot bring ashes home or keep the urn in your room. Ashes don't germinate life. Ramification, release, rebirth. I feel you, almost grinning at the edge of the polished rim before the brass vessel bobbles away into the setting sun. The incense burns, sandalwood. Did you promise to reach me as soon as you arrive there? We gather at the dinner table, extended family and all, purgation, release, rebirth. Today, we serve Rajma Chawal. Tomorrow is chicken curry day, exactly like you relish it, marinated overnight, well washed, clean. I wish you could hear them asking me if I would write something about the process of putting away life. I wish you would come back, turn around for a day, so I could grab one soaked drop of your voice and nest its vibration within my ribcage. Salvation.
And that was Just a Process After All. Really touching poem from Woman by the Door. Can you talk a little bit about your writing process? One of the things that stands out is there are a lot of variation in the ways that you write. There's sonnet, or haiku sequences. Yeah. There are poems with short lines mixed about. There's some what do you call it, concrete poems as well. Yeah. So how do you encounter a poem if you decide that there's something you want to write about? Like, what is your writing process like? Do you write frequently? You know, how do you know how to shape a poem? What goes on?
Yeah, I do write frequently. A couple of years ago, I made it a habit to make writing the daily process. It's hard. It's not like you have inspiration to create perfection every day, but I put something on the page every day. Some of that also started with the habit of journaling. Not every journal entry is a poem and not every poem is a journal entry, but there's some intermingling that happens with that habit as well. So that's one. In terms of the rest of the process, and I'll come to the haiku point in a second here. But once the content is on the page, like first I just let it go, right? Just let it flow the way it should flow, or it wants to come to me, and I don't have control over that either, right? When it's coming and it's happening, then you don't really control what's coming out. But it's the after process of editing, even before you get to editing, it's the sound and sense of the poem that I look for. And I do that by reading it out loud often to myself. I do that when I read other work as well, is I do like to read it out loud and question what's there. And then I follow and this is a very business tool, but I do use it, which is the why process, right? So why does this need to be written? Why does it need to be written now? Why does it need to be written by me? Mm-hmm. And that helps either putting it in the junk bag, taking it further, or maybe adjusting what needs to be said. And then the haiku, I came to haiku just a few years ago, and I'm glad I did for so many reasons. Besides, of course, that it's there's so much beautiful poetry to read in the haiku world that you wouldn't get exposed to if you weren't in the haiku community. But it also has taught me the process of reduction. I think my own process of reduction has improved as I've started doing writing, learning, reading haiku. And then lastly, to your earlier question, haiku connects back to the point about spiritual connections to daily moments, and whether it's nature or otherwise, right?
Mhm.
Or haiku, tanka, haibun, whichever form you do it. And that's really what it's all about, right? The Japanese poetry is all about life and how you translate that into a small 3-line poem.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that coming to haiku recently, because it feels like that was the interesting contrast reading the book, is that you feel, I would say, like you're a maximalist poet, like for a lot of the poems. And then you get to
Suddenly,
and then you like it's stripped down into the minimalism in the haiku sequence. Do you find that more comes out that way, or do you think, or is the process the same and then you strip it down to the haiku?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's very intentionally, like this is going to be the haiku, like the one, that series that got published in the Rattle, and we'll probably read it, Normal, which is around the peak of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That was intentionally haiku. I approached it as haiku, but it does happen that I've put something on a page and I realize like crap, and I get the haikus out of it. So it's both.
Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions for Kashiana, leave them in the chat windows, and I will pass them along. Let's hear another poem, though, and just say that clicking, I realized, is actually the microphone hitting the necklace. That's what it is.
Of
so
course
it's not
it is,
static.
right?
Yeah.
Of course it is. I will hold it.
No problem.
Because I'm not removing my necklace for sure. All right. Do you want to go to another poem?
Yeah. What do you want to read next?
Since we're talking haiku, let's do the haiku. I'll read Normal, which is page 81.
Okay.
Is it better when I hold it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just when you move, it kind of clicks against the necklace, yeah.
Normal. Rare blue moon, another ambulance, and blue lights. Rare blue moon, another ambulance, and blue lights. Obituaries, age, color, caste, no bar. Obituaries, age, color, caste, no bar. Tourist season, an empty colosseum of silent coffins. War zones, a worldwide bunker of chaos. War zones, a worldwide bunker of chaos. Shallow breaths, grandma whispers a final blessing. Shallow breaths, grandma whispers a final blessing. Cancelled flights, the Godwit migrates again this year. Cancelled flights, the Godwit migrates again this year. Ocean waves, the dip and rise of economics. Normal. This is the haiku series that you had published.
Yeah, this was part of Poets Respond, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a pandemic haiku sequence, and I love the different angles. Haiku is just such a great way of looking at things through, very precisely from different directions, and that's what this sequence does. So this sort of brings up another topic, though, is that you're an editor at Poets Reading the News, and have been doing that for, I think, a year or so?
2+ years.
2+ years, yeah. So what has your experience been like with that, and why did you get involved? Because I think it's been around for like maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So what made you get involved, and what's your experience been like with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's approximately 2 years. I got published with them, and then they had an opening for an editor, and I just applied. The reason I wanted 2 things. Why did I want to do the editor hat is because I think it hones your craft differently when you're sitting at the other side of the table, and the chance to read so much poetry, as you always said, will never happen in any other way except when you're doing something that's time bound and you're coming to it like worship again, because you're not reading for pleasure, you're reading because it's your task and job to do it, but you also enjoy it. So that's why I wanted to do the editor. Why Poets Reading the News in the association is I love the connection of journal, it's like Poets Respond, right? The journalism and poetry connection was very special to me and different as compared to the mainstream journals or other editor positions that I could have gone to. It's been an outstanding experience for that very reason. One, the last 2 years have had so much, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the pandemic or the insurrection or everything happened in the global scenario as well. My home country, India, has had just political, right, upheaval in its own ways. And I know we've read a few poems on Poets Reading, Poets Respond, Tim as well. But the biggest learning and the biggest enriching factor from that association has been how, like Tatiana's poem, right? How people come to these call for response, but the poem itself could be about a bird, about a butterfly, right? About a child that's crying, and yet the essence of the gravity and the gravitas of that moment comes through. And so the beauty of learning that through other people's craft has been very enriching. And I've made my own notes along the way every day. So I kind of keep two things. One is the editor response, and I keep my own notes on the side because it's like a mini MFA, right? It's teaching you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find with Poet Respond is because the news is so politicized. I mean, it's always political, and there's always and so a lot of our responses end up being polemics, I guess, or we have our opinions about things, and then we're sharing those rather than sort of exploring the world through poetry, I think. And there's a real clear distinction. I think a lot of the submissions that we get, tend to just have such a strong perspective to start with that they don't go anywhere, I guess maybe is a way to put it. Do you find that too? Is that something that you look for when you're reading submissions?
Yes, absolutely. Right. Which is why I was kind of referring to, they talk about other things, but not my opinion on the situation or the call itself. Right. But yes, there is a lot of that comes across. And I think it's almost, there's so much that people just need to purge. And so they need to put it on paper. And that call for input serves as a purging process for lots of people. And that's okay and appreciated. But to your point, it may not be the poem you want to publish.
It's just something I always wonder about, though, because poetry, as a vehicle for messaging is something, Plato kicked poets out of his republic or whatever because of the way they could manipulate messaging. And there's a way that poetry can be used as a tool to spread your opinion. And so I wonder, I don't know, there's something I'm always kind of confused about in my own opinions of how to run things, is that like should we push, let people just share their sort of simple, I don't know how to put it, but you know what I mean? Like I think of poetry as explorative, but poetry as a kind of messaging has a place too. And so
as a revolution, as a tool for revolution, as a tool for rebellion, right?
Exactly,
that's what it's always served across the years. But you're right, we had that situation just around the election, of course, you had as well, is when the January of around that time, December, January, and we had that, actually, we got in a meeting and we had that exact dialogue as to how far do you go? Or do you not want to go? Or are you okay, right? Because that's really a position as a paper, as a journal. So I think that's a different topic, but it's an important one.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, and what about the aspect too? And I'm just, because I haven't talked to an editor on here who does anything like this. About like some people feel like writing poems about current events are sort of exploitative. Like I've even seen some people that talk about Ukraine, like this is the big news that everybody's talking about. And so we're publishing poems like these. So it's like, oh, look at me, I'm writing a poem and getting more clicks on our website or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I disagree with that, but I'm wondering.
I disagree too.
But I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. Yeah.
Well, I disagree for sure. However, and you do that all the time, right, Tim? Is the two A's, which is the authenticity and I don't even want to use the word appropriation, right? Because that's not relevant here, but the authenticity or the credibility in a poem will come through, right? We'll go back to today's poem. Everyone may not have gone through what Tatiana went through, and her poem was just the most powerful poem, of course, also because she brings herself to that page. Could somebody else write? Yes. Does it need to be because it's taking advantage, or because you truly want, right, to pick something from what's going on in that situation and translate it into a different message for the world? So yeah, it's a hard balance, but I don't think it should be stopped. And I think the poet who's submitting will know or should know. It's up to the poet who's submitting to know whether you're being authentic or you're just writing for the sake of putting it out there because it's a topic of the day, right?
Yeah.
It's fashionable to do so.
Yeah, I think authenticity is the perfect word, and honesty too. I mean, it feels like you can just hear. It's almost like hearing like a melody or something, and you know it's music. Like you can hear honesty in a voice, and that's what I'm listening for, and trying to find some authentic grappling with a topic rather than just presenting the topic. So yeah.
And then the craft, right? Like you will ultimately, you are a poetry journal and you are using poetry. So how does that craft get used? Like, is there a unique use of language? Is there a unique ending phrase? Like, what does that person bring to the table about the craft as well? Yeah,
exactly. Very important. Let's hear another poem.
Since we're talking political, let's do, I'm looking for the page. 1 second, please. It's Portrait of a Mother in America, and it 28. Should be page 28. Yeah. Portrait of a Mother in America. You are an unstoppable maverick. You tenderly define the fossils we shall be. You are restless as you lie awake. Your forgiveness is now a lung emptied of breath. You are monastic as you listen to the bells ring. Your joy transient in yet another uncounted night. You are a widow wailing at the steps of a lake, a practiced palanquin bearer of skinned surrender. You are a witch with long arms. They embrace bodies showered from dilating skies. You are songwriter, fact narrator. Watchwords are written in your inherited ink. You are awake. You awaken, teasing your dreadlocks into witness stands for the dead. You are yesterday's battles and tomorrow's cries. You beat in ballads, you rehearse poems to throbbing drums. You are louder with each breath. You penetrate a deafening normal inside and outside. You are repetition. You sketch a scrawl that leaves scars on a country's cardboard map. You are hunger. Your sharp tongue bites into cornbread, ready again for another funeral pageantry. You are unabashed. You offer your breast to beating chests, fostering care for conjugated loss. You are ricocheted through our mistakes. Your prayer is a pause inside vacant throats. You are conversation to our silence. You pour questions into our coagulated eyes. You are a mosaic of common journey. Your pilgrimage is to places where multitudes died. You are sister, you are princess. You dance in compassion, holding your head high. You are your ancestors. You are leader, you are healer. You make garments of their velvet, flagellated skins. You are language, farmer of roots. You nourish the irreverence of all marching youth. You are baptized. You are ostracized. You drink from the thirsty fountain of wakeful lives. You are time, of all moonless times. You rudder the sea to the sky. You swallow meteorites. You are inadequate in your cones. You ache in psalms that sing into life and afterlife. You are relentless, a stitcher of quilts. You fill it with absence, thread it with sinew of barren wombs. Portrait of a Mother in America. This was around the George Floyd situation.
Yeah, and one of my favorite poems in the book. Such a great litany. The rhythms in that are just amazing, and the way the details carry through the poem. The you are a mosaic of a common journey. I love that line too, and just that's one of the sort of central lines in the book. I kind of feel like is that's the woman by the door, the mosaic of a common journey. We haven't really talked about you mentioned the sections, detours, portals, apertures. How did the book how did you come to that shape in the book? Was that something that it took a lot of time to put together, or was that idea right away in the formation of the book originally?
That's a great question. And no, it wasn't in the formation of the book originally. Like I said, I usually let the poems happen. I don't start off with, oh, now I'm going to write the book, though I do have a thought about my next project, but we can talk about that later, which is the first time that I have it. But no, the book wasn't designed like that from the start. The book is a conglomeration of poems that got written in the last 10 years. So you mentioned I've been in the US for around that time, and most of these poems are written, or they might have formed earlier, but came into shape around that time. So that's a common theme. They're not about events in the 10 years, but they're written in the 10 years. So the perspective I have to events past is different because of the geographical distance, the physical distance, and my own transition as a woman and my being at the door myself. So like we always do, right? I started to then put thematically together what it looks like. The one thought I had when I got the title and when I started thinking about the shape of the book is I wanted it to be something cinemascape-ish, right? And that's where you see aperture and portal and detour, because I do think our lives is a cinemascape that you can almost play in front of your eyes. And that was my vision for the book, and then the sections came about just because it was important for me to distinguish for myself and for the receiver of the book, the three sections, because there is some distinctness, even though there's a commonality and the arc closes back. So.
There's a question here from Dick Westheimer. How do the sounds and music of Indian inflected English vis-a-vis American inflected English work in your poems? Is that the music of the two different voices, is that something that, how does that impact the poems?
That's thank you for the question. It's a great question, and I smile because you use the word mosaic, right? I think it's both, right? And there's probably because remember the Indian English is, as we study in our schools, the influence is a lot of British English as well, right? So there's all of that comes into play. I don't consciously then come to the poem even later to say, oh, I want to keep this with the Indian aspect, and I could keep this with no, that's not what I do. But I do know, and I've heard from people who've read it, including editors and early critics who've said that both those flavors seep through. Going back to my prior point, I'm very conscious about not being shy about the natural Indian musicality, sound, sense, words to seep in. Because that's to your point, that's the authenticity that I don't want to take away from my poetry.
That brings up something that I'm always interested in too, is just how poetry is encountered in other cultures and other countries. And what was your experience of poetry like in India before you came here? I mean, we've talked about with other guests before, because we had an Indian poets issue, and so it's come up a lot. But the way that the various mosaic, to use that word again, of languages, affects the whole poetry world, a very regional kind of way, and in sort of an immersive way too. That poetry exists there. What was your experience of poetry before coming to the United States? Did you publish poems in India before? Is that something you were doing regularly? And what was it like? What is the state of poetry in India, in English, I guess, because we're English readers? Like, where can we find things?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. First of all, it's important to go back and say, like, the traditional, right, starting with the Vedic work, it's all poetry, right? So there is a very strong tradition of oral storytelling, poetry. It has the longest history, written in various languages, right? Tamil has a lot of poetry. Of course, Sanskrit has a lot of poetry, and then the regional languages. Then let's come to the education system, right? And how you get exposed to poetry in India. And a lot of it is exposure to the Wordsworths of the world, and Shakespeare and Keats and Yeats and Blake and so on and so forth, because the school system is less contemporary reading. And I think that's probably true of here as well. It's maybe starting to change now, but there's a lot of infusion of classical poetry. So that's two. And then as you come out of that, and if you do happen to pick up, oh, I want to do poetry, right? Then the question is, do you have community, and do you have support in publishing? Yes, and it's growing. There is, however, it's limited to a few cities. So Mumbai was the home of a lot of poetry just because of the language. There was a lot of Anglo-Indian, there's a Jewish community in Mumbai. And so there were poems, Nizam-e-Zikal, which you've probably read off. If you've not, you should. Everybody on the call should read him. Kamala Das, who's I call the original feminist. She wrote in the lines of Sylvia Plath, more like a confessional poet. Amrita Preetham is a Punjabi poet. I call her the original rebel in her poetry. So there's that, right? But communities and real publishing is now coming more to the fore, Tim. Publishing was limited, not as much. So I did publish some, but there wasn't as much of as many forums. The spoken word, though, became very popular in the last 10, 12 years. So there's a very active community of the spoken words. And I'll then wrap by saying, remember though, India is a country that's vast, and the breadth and depth and the variation between cities, towns, and villages is huge. So a lot of what I'm talking about is a lot of what I'm exposed to, which is the larger metropolis cities. And it's now penetrating into some of the smaller ones, but may not be as much otherwise. Yeah,
that's why it's so interesting to ask about it, because it's just so varied and diverse in the way that the poetry operates there. It's really interesting. As opposed to here that has so much of a university, academic sort of support underneath it all, which is sort of a homogenization mechanism or something in a way.
Yes.
So if there was a journal, to check out, is there something you could point us to read?
Yep. Let me, before we wrap the session, once again, I'll post in the chat, Tim, a couple of links to a few journals. And there's the Sahitya Academy, which is the letters organization of relevance comparison to India. And there's a couple of other good places that people who want to read can go.
Well, we have room for about 2 more poems and then a little bit more discussion. So what do you want as your second to last poem?
Oh, that's hard. Let me do Pagri turbans, since we're talking about authenticity and language and so on and so forth. And it's one of my favorite poems. And also, I think my father might be on the line listening, so this is for him.
Okay.
All right, I'll pull it up. You have it?
Yep, I do.
Pagri turbans. All my writing was born into the folds of my father's pagri, one in each fold of his khaki, cotton, starched, smooth, sturdy. I attempted to shape stanzas with my tongue while my hands pulled, stretched, unbound all the 6 yards of cloth, unfurling beginnings. I proudly held at one end on mornings when I was called upon to help twist the length. The landscape of that moment had a spirituality, a gravitas. It snatched at my throat. Settling into creased circles, my voice had so much to say. Instead, in quiet observation, I gave it all my care, all my curiosity. His prayer had a very specific tempo. I never dared disturb it. I saw an intimate conversation sprouting into the empty spaces of teacher and disciple, unsaid. A sacred hum became audible. I heard stories being revealed as elders sang hymns in waves. Gentle metaphors were formed in faith as a circular wrapping, folded and unfolded words. They became mine, unborn into me as I held the fabric taut, was taught letters, my fingers at the edge of a long puggree, he so reticently pulled at the other. Tugging just so, he said to me each time we symmetrically styled a turban in performance together. You, my daughter, my poem. Pagri.
Yeah, those pagri turbans from Woman by the Door. Thanks so much for sharing that one. Another beautiful poem. You mentioned they have a new project going on. Do you want to reveal what that is? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, two. One is a very humble, small project, and it's really trying to do haiku for children, like toddlers or early school children, on the theme of sustainability and whatever's going on with the environment, along with illustrations with somebody. So trying to do that. Again, that's a simple A to Z, right, for every letter of the alphabet. But it's funny, right? You think I signed, we had a quick discussion, and the illustrator and we said, let's do it. And we said, like, we'll be done, right? Like in 3-4 weeks, I'll be able to put the haiku down and you can do your illustrations. And of course not, because when you start editing that and you think of the audience, right? And the subject at hand, like the subject is so important and the audience you want to touch is right at the beginning when you're entering school. So I've gone through 3-4 rounds of edits and I'm still not done with it.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever seen haiku directed at children before.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen either. There may be something, but no, I've not seen, not aware of.
Yeah, and it's so important to get more poetry, quality poetry in front of kids. I think the children's books, some of them are great poetry and some of them are not great poetry.
Not great poetry.
Yeah, I mean, having little kids, that's one lesson I learned, is that some of the things I just refuse to read certain books that my little toddlers come up to me with, because I just couldn't handle the terrible clunkiness of the
of what was there on the page.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm glad you said it. One of the inspiration, of course, there was sustainability. It was like haiku, since I was passionate about haiku, but there was also like this, the way haiku is taught creates a fear for haiku, right? Because it's like, you want to put it in a box, you want to talk about the syllabic rules, you put it into all these rules. And by the way, I want to caveat, I keep saying haiku. I know the purists will dismiss my poems as saying these are not haiku at all. So I would say my poems are haiku inspired. I'm nowhere ready to call myself a haijin yet. But yes, that was, to your point, that was one of the reasons, which is let's take the fear out of haiku and also let's get poetry early. And I have a few like experimental children that we can probably test it with as well.
And you mentioned another project too. What's the other one?
The other one's still in. What I want to do is a book of poetry letters with other poets. And I haven't got to it yet, but it goes back to the many geographies and the many places that I call my home or I carry within me, and trying to get that aligned together, but doing it through letters with other poets. If somebody wants to sign up, please let me know.
Well, it's definitely out there now. Okay, so let's finish out with one last poem.
Okay. I will pick, let's do Becoming Planets, which is page 37. becoming planets. And the subscript, this is after Greta Thunberg, and you'll see why as I close the poem. If I could be a planet, I would like to be Mercury, bearing myself to the sun, those times when I need brightness 7 times stronger than myself. Or maybe the clumsy Uranus, stuttering sideways, self-effacing, but living the moods of my 27 moons and never having to explain myself before or after menopause. I have even speculated Mars, read in the face evidence of my travails, receding further into my atmosphere. I would mock the men who stumbled for oxygen after kissing me. Maybe Neptune is who I will be, distant, forlorn, and cold to touch, icicles inside my craters as I paced centuries of black holes, no one to fault, my goddess. I am a planet, though, as every woman before. I bleed myself hollow, I swallow my volcanoes, I spin for all before me who were dwarfed, I draw orbits around names of all our departed souls, I weave a Kuiper belt with the fallen ringlets of my hair. I gather our screams till they pierce through the veins of these stars, I repeat all of the above, I rotate, I revolve, I burn, I am born into the firmament above. I become my solar system, my tears crystallize into brooding planets, swaying to the blah, blah, blah of a flawed earth as it still manages to trudge along, becoming planets.
Yeah, that was Becoming Planets. And that was one poem that I was wondering, how did you get, is because the blah, blah, blah quote, it felt like that was like last week. How did that get in the book?
it was earlier.
Yeah, I know. It was like September or something.
Couple of months earlier, but yes, and it came about as part of the editing process.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's an example of something that came about as part of the editing process. And what I wanted to do with that poem, of course, it's woman, right? It's woman, and that's the obvious thing, and it's transition of bodily transition as well. But there's also the woman and Greta's call, and it was almost like, oh, the howling menopausal woman, and that's what the earth is, right? That's howling for attention for all of us. So that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, well, really cool poems, a really great book, Woman by the Door. Thanks so much for being a guest, Kashiana. It was a pleasure talking to you, as I knew it would be. I'm glad we could have you on an episode, and congratulations on this new book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and have a good rest of the session.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, so we are going to take a quick break, go to open lines. We have some special guests. Kim Stafford is here, who had yesterday's excellent set of 5 poems about Ukraine. He'll be joining us. We also have a Tuesday poet, Brian Beatty, has a short poem that we're going to be publishing on Tuesday that we'll share with you if he can join us. Then we'll have the open lines as well. Now, the open lines is going to be over Zoom from now on. Let me put this on the screen. It's really easy to use Zoom. So there's only 2 steps now. Email your poems so I can show them on the screen like I was showing Kashiana's to Open Mic. That's openmic at rattle.com. And then just find the Zoom link, which I am pasting right now into the chat windows. And I'm even going to pin on the YouTube. I can pin the message so it's like highlighted at the top. Just click that link and join us on Zoom. And then I'll go to you one at a time. We'll unmute you and we'll go to your poems. And then if you want to just pop into Zoom for a little bit and then come back to the stream wherever you're watching it, so you can read along and watch the poems, that would be great too. So sort of just think of this as like you're popping in on hold on Zoom. Watch the show. Listen over Zoom like you would be if you were calling into a radio show, and then come back to wherever you're watching the stream originally. I'll put the link in the in Facebook too, and hopefully this will work for everybody. Last week it went really well. So here we go. So I'm going to put up some music, and we will be right back in just a few minutes as everybody comes in to the Zoom stream. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. We have some great lineup of open mic readers, and Kim Stafford is here, who had Saturday's amazing cycle of 5 poems for Ukraine. Here is Kim Stafford. Hey, Kim, how you doing?
I'm doing well. So good to be with you, Tim.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I've enjoyed your work for a long time, and I think the first time we've actually published you. So it's really, really fun to see you in an issue of Rattle, and such an amazing set of poems you have here. You mentioned, and you sent additional poems too. You sent the one. I think the first poem that you had on the list was the last one we published, "Calling Home." And I thought, wow, we're publishing that poem. And then I clicked next, and there was another one, and then another one, and another one. And when I emailed you to say we'd like to publish 5 of them, you said I have 5 more. And so you're writing. It's really part of your writing process, as you mentioned. Do you want to explain why?
Some of my students, Tim, say with the pandemic or the search for justice or war, I'm just paralyzed. I can't write. I have the opposite feeling that trouble in the world is an incandescent prompt for poetry, really calls for poetry, rather than being paralyzed. As my wife says, talk back to darkness.
Yeah, that's a great.
And I think, the news, this is one thing Rattle so beautifully provides a forum for. The news is filled with prompts. Really demands for imagination, thought, alternative ideas about what we're here to do.
Yeah, and so how do you go about making it actual poems? Because the amazing thing, like poems that explore something and find some, there's always some kind of itch that a poet is scratching, or some kind of thing you're trying to make sense of, and that lifts it beyond, sort of just reacting. And so how do you search through these news items and find the poem in there?
Well, I think poetry is following the lead of a seed turning into a sapling, turning into a tree. There's some little thing in the news, often at the periphery, something you glimpse, a word that catches you. And I just sit with that every morning, sometimes for a long time, Tim, with the feeling, well, that's nothing. There's nothing. Well, there's something. And then to watch it grow as my hand moves across the page, for me, that is an essential way to begin the day. So I watch them grow.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing that, writing a poem every day? Has it been decades?
Well, my dad, he was famous or notorious for his writing too many poems, writing every day. And on the January 1st of his centennial year, 2014, I just made a vow. I'm gonna write every day. And say one thing about this, there's a poet here in Oregon, Elizabeth Woody, who's Navajo, Wasco, and she said, the more I do poetry, the less it's about what the poem is, and the more about who the poem serves. Who the poem serves. So I've just gotten in the habit of writing a short poem and putting it on Instagram every day. Not knowing who it might serve, but to give it a chance, like publishing in Rattle or another magazine, to put it out there to find a reader who can use it.
Yeah, that's okay. I didn't realize you were doing that on Instagram. What is your Instagram handle so we can
Kim
follow
Stafford Poetry.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. And you sort of touched on it a little bit, but how is the process of writing every day for, I guess, the last 8 years, how has that affected the writing process itself? Did they come more easily doing it that way? Or is it, or does it make you, has it done something too, I'm wondering, just like spiritually within you? Do you feel better about things because of that?
Yeah, well, this morning before this program, Tim, I was on a international Zoom meditation. There were people in Kyiv, there were people in Finland, there were people from all over India. And our leader in the meditation said, as you're breathing in silence, open your heart. Open your heart. And I feel like that's what you do when you sit down to write a poem. You sort of put aside propaganda, news, fear, regret, put aside all those things, open your heart, and into that space something steps shyly. And then, as I say, after doing this for years, still there's that feeling, there's nothing. Well, something comes, and I spend a lot of time then revising what first comes, trying to shape it so it can serve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we have to have you on for a full episode sometime soon. I hope you will. But let's hear this poem, the 5 poems for Ukraine right now.
Okay. First, I'll read the short one. I was imagining, after reading that there's a danger of Zelensky being killed, assassinated, or executed, so I wrote top hit. But comrades, if we kill him, someone will make a martyr song, and it will become the anthem sung by thousands in the streets. First their streets, then our own. And if we put them all in prison, they will sing it there. And if we send them to Siberia, soon it will be our children singing. You can kill a man, you can kill thousands, but a song? I guess that's my plea for poetry, Tim. You can't kill a song.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful
I had a chance to spend some time with Yevgeny Yevtushenko, and he wrote this poem, Babi Yar, for the a place of atrocity in Ukraine. And he said, I am welcome in every synagogue in the world because of this poem. Okay, so the hard part. It's easy to lie at first. People want to believe you. And betrayal, a cinch. You control the first move. Killing is so easy, it's absurd. People didn't see it coming. Even war, if you're the one to start it, goes well for a while. Sure, people hate you, fear you, looking down as they surrender. Once you win, for a thin moment, you enjoy the ornate word, victory. It glitters in your hands like dirty gold. And then I think many of us saw the little clip of the great old lady approaching the Russian soldier saying, here, take these sunflower seeds, put them in your pocket, then when you die and you're buried, something good will come from you. I thought that is beautiful, dark humor. That is courage. That's a little bit of poetry, a move like that. So I wrote sunflower seeds. First I looked up, it's the national flower of Ukraine and of Russia.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Sunflower seeds crossing borders. So wow. Sunflower seeds. How many do you have? Enough to line the roads? Enough to give to others so they can fill the fields? Enough to plant in every bomb crater, bullet hole? That would be too many. If you have just one can spiral into 1,000 in a halo of gold. Where will you hide it in the earth so every seed may declare peace for a survivor's knees at a brother's grave? Now this next one, Mother's Mending, before I write, I get up at 4, take a walk in the dark, and, ideas gather. And this little sing-song refrain started to gather in my mind. You'll hear it in the poem. It's called Mother's Mending. After the tussle, or would you call it a clash, we stitch the torn uniforms you men bring home. Little needle, glint, and glide. After the cut, or would you call it a gash, we stitch the torn skin you men bring in. Little needle, glint, and glide, lead this thread to heal and hide. After the war, or should we call it murder, We stitch the shrouds you men wear now. Little needle, glint, and glide, lead this thread to heal and hide. Never ask us to explain why you left us here in pain. And I think I really got onto a thing about mothers, seeing the clips of the Russian soldiers calling home to their mothers. And so this last one, Tim, calling home, and it starts with this line from one of those clips when the soldier says to his mother, "How can we kill them? They look like us." So, when you write a poem, you say, well, let me see what that would be like. Let me just explore that. Calling home. An old man who limped like Uncle Alexei stumbled, and we shot him. He had a gun, yes, but he wore a cap like the one you knit for me. One wore a coat like father's. He tumbled off a bridge into the river. When I shot one running into the forest, his hands flew up like Brother Oleg, twitching. I remember Grandfather Sasha shouting when he was disturbed too early, before his tea. Here a graybeard shouted as we passed, and my commander shot him on his doorstep. One my age, when he was hit, cried out, "Arina!" Who will have to tell her? If I die, who will tell you? I can't sleep. I see these faces everywhere. When my gun is cold, I am afraid. When it is hot, I am ashamed. What will happen to children here, like our Slava, Vasil, Ksenia? And if I live, after I have a hero's welcome, tell me, Mother, after you hold me in your arms, what will happen to me?
It's just beautiful cycle of poems, Kim. Thanks so much for sharing those and being on.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's appreciated. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Talk to you soon. Okay, let's go to next. Let's go to Dick Westheimer.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah, hey, how you doing, Dick?
Well, I'm just that cycle of poems. All of the Poets Respond poems yesterday and today were just stunning.
Yeah, I mean, these times when things are trying and we have so much going on emotionally, given the weight of it, the poetry really comes through. I mean, it's something that we all go to for meaning and understanding and sharing and getting together, and doing something positive at least too. So there's just been some great poems in the submissions.
Yeah, and just on a personal basis, you get rejections, right? When you submit yourself to your own sort of emotional expectations, but then when you see the poems that were selected, it sort of changes the emotional tenor of that. It's
well, I'm glad to get to see him soon too, because of that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I mean, it is like I always have you filter down to like top 25 and then the top 15 and then the top 5 and then eventually you got to narrow it down to 3 or so. But so what was it that you wanted to share?
So time for 1 or 2?
Let's see. Well, let's do 2. I think we have time for 2.
Okay. So I sent in 2 Poets Respond poems this week, A Sword in Both Hands and My Body Responds to Contingent Times.
Okay, let me pull that up. And I should say, I think maybe the rule for this week, so we have 18, 19 people here. We should say probably 2 short poems or 1 longer poem. That's what I'll say for this week.
Okay, well then I'll do A Sword in Both Hands and then my prompt poem that I just...
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
That'll work. And the Sword in Both Hands sort of was a response to and my body responds to contingent times.
Hang on 1 second.
Yeah.
I think maybe
somebody unmute. I got to find who unmuted.
19 people here.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to Dick. Sorry. Yeah, don't unmute yourself until I ask. I thought I had it. Let's see. I'm going to put it so people can't unmute, and I think I can still request. That's how it's supposed to be. So I just set it up wrong.
I got a request.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I'm fully, like I think just about everybody on these calls, fully empathetic and horrified and sort of approving of the resistance steps that the U.S. has taken in regards to what's going on in Ukraine and hope for more. But I also realize that millions of people in the last 20 years have died at the hands of American adventurism, an illegal and uncalled for invasion of Iraq, violating its sovereignty, a war in Yemen that we've funded and supported. And
I mean, bombs are falling in Yemen right now. There are bombs that our tax dollars paid for.
Yeah. So this was sort and then there was that terrific Trevor Noah piece that was done on the different reception of refugees in Poland and Germany and some of these other countries. So this is in response to that, called A Sword in Both Hands. And Dion Brand from the epigraph, one is misled when one looks at the sails and majesty of tall ships instead of their cargo. We are a camera photographing itself, America. We are the majesty of tall ships, and we are the cargo, America. We are the jeweled sword, and we are the slain. We raise the blade and knight the brave in Ukraine, America. We bless them with crowns and say they look like America, America. We arm them with garlands of dragon-slaying missiles and javelins of the finest steel. We bear our sword arm, America, and intone our money prayers. We strip the evil enemy of coin and commerce. We are money gods, America. And this we do with the right hand, America. With the left, we hold a pock-marked sword notched with brown bodies, America. We place the sword in the hands of bone-saw kings who do not look like America, America, to slay those who the camera cannot see, because we say, America, that brown and far away are not America, America. Those who have before them other gods than America are not America, America. Their brave cannot be knighted by our jeweled blades, America, because only those we say are America, America. The camera can only photograph itself, America. The camera that can only photograph itself, America, is a mirror that only sees itself, is a sword that only slays itself, America.
Yeah, great poem as always, Dick, and an important message too. And so the other poem was for the prompt, which I haven't even mentioned what the prompt was yet. The prompt for this week was, I can't remember the name of the the name of the form.
Discord
poem. A Discord poem.
Discord, excuse me. Yes.
Yeah, I'd never heard of this before. I don't know where Megan pulled that up out from, but so this is going to be your Discord poem.
Yes, and there was a lot of chatter going on in the little Rattle things like, how the hell are we going to do this?
Yeah, mine is a total failure. You'll see in a little bit.
I don't know if I followed the rules or not, but because I just couldn't make no sense.
Yeah, I gave up. But anyway, let's hear yours.
Yeah, too many questions in a time of disquiet. A naked man perches on a light pole outside a Krispy Kreme. Fire! What do you think about nuclear power? The first crocuses of spring were stepped on by the delivery guy. I have no idea what I will make for dinner. I lied. I do. I don't. I do. I lied. Dead to me? Netflix. Mourn is the Wordle word today. A naked man will sleep with my wife tonight. Is assassination war? Nothing is. Everything is. Not, are, not, was, not, but were, has been, bought, has been. The world writes a book but does not read it. Through to the end is the beginning. The has, have, but wouldn't the ocean see? If you can understand time, space does not know space, is not a place. But I am therefore, I think, the naked man was me.
Yeah, that was a good effort at that Discord poem. I don't really understand the
Good
concept.
effort.
No, I think it's good. It was good. I mean, like you actually made something of the the chaos of it, which I couldn't figure out how to do. I couldn't even. I don't know. It was very confusing to me as a style of poem.
Well,
But
you have to. The chaos is sort of like the prompt
Mhm.
is chaos.
Yeah,
And,
well,
and, you
good.
know, there's enough chaos in the world to feed it. So,
Yeah, well, good job, Dick. Always a pleasure.
okay, thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
And yeah, so we're gonna mute Dick again, and then just a reminder: if you're not sharing poems, there's no reason to be here on the Zoom. You can just stay and watch it on YouTube. The Zoom is just for people who want to share poems on the open mic. And let's see, and then after you read, you can go back to the YouTube page too, and watch that, because there you can see the full Rattlecast experience with the poems and the poet side by side and all that stuff. But let's go next to Joseph Nolan. Hey, Joseph, are you there? I asked you to unmute.
Oh, hi, Tim.
Hey, Joseph, how you doing?
Okay.
I can't. It's kind of let's see. I don't have a video or let's
Hold on.
see. There you go.
Okay?
Yeah, now we have you, and we see you. Perfect. Okay, just took a little bit. So
Okay. Let me see. I'll pull something up. I wasn't aware I was going to be called today. I just I'm not used to this new thing with the Zoom. I hadn't sent anything in for today.
Oh, you didn't?
But,
okay. Yeah, so just to say for everybody again, if you're on Zoom, it's only for sharing on the open lines. If you want to just watch, just stay on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. And
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll read one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this one is called "Go We Now to War." They have become an enemy, called on us to destroy them. Descend we now, as ghosts borne down by gravity, shadows summoned downward to deliver prayed for slaughter. Go we now to war. End of poem.
Yeah, beautiful. Always love hearing your work, how you read. It's really fun, Joseph. It's always great to hear you. Thanks for popping in.
Oh, thanks. Next time I'll be more ready.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so Brian Beatty's here. Let's talk to Brian Beatty. We'll ask him to unmute. And Brian has a poem that's coming up tomorrow, or Tuesday. So, hey, Brian, how you doing?
All right. Thanks for taking this poem for Poets Respond, Tim, and thanks for inviting me to today's reading.
Yeah, it's really cool to see you. And this poem is very short, which everybody's seen. No one's had a chance to read it yet, but very memorable. It was one of those, tight, small poems that'll like stay with you forever, I think. Can you just explain what inspired the poem, how it came to be?
Well, obviously, the Ukraine's in the media. COVID remains in the media, year two now, winter two. And as big as those can be and can feel, it's also the little things of winter that can just kind of chip away at morale and chip away at positivity. So I was driving home from work last week, and I live in Minnesota, where we take winter very seriously here because it's a serious thing. But we had some snow melt, and it was one of these incidents where sometimes you see a kid's random shoe just in the middle of the street, but it being winter, there was literally just a random snow boot in the middle of the street. And I was kind of just haunted by that image and decided to write something about it. And then with Tim's message this morning that my poem had been selected for publication this week, I also woke to 5 fresh inches of snow, as if to just grind it in that we're not through winter yet up here.
Yeah, well, we got up here in the mountains of SoCal, we had a couple inches yesterday too, and it was we're definitely sick of it. We had a Little League practice, and then the snows came, and not fun.
Yeah, we went from freezing rain to snow, and so under this 5 inches of snow, there's a nice little layer of ice as well to just make it even more interesting.
Yeah. Here. Well, why don't you go ahead and read this poem that's coming up on Tuesday? Winter Can Go Now.
It's called Winter Can Go Now. That child's dirty boot out there alone in the middle of the snow-rutted street has collapsed again like a grandfather's lawn. I watch at the window, holding my breath for no reason.
Yeah, great haunting poem. It just sits there with you like that boot does. And the holding my breath for no reason. A great ending. It's a really cool little poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Brian.
Thanks again for having me, Tim.
Yeah, take care. Yeah, so that was Tuesday's poem coming up. And now let's go to another open lines caller. Let's try to find somebody who hasn't been on before yet. Craig Brandis is here. I'll ask Craig to unmute and we'll see what he's got for us.
Hi, everyone. I've had the experience in the last week or so of having beautiful Ukrainian paintings show up in my Facebook feed.
Oh, yeah.
And they're part of a group called, or they're posted to a group called Women Hold Up Half the Sky. And what's so striking about them is they're rooted in the folk culture and the iconography of Ukraine, but they're so vibrant and they're so full of resilience. And one of them just jumped out at me, and this is the one I'm sent in. It's called On Self-Portrait by Ukrainian artist Yana Movchan. A pink camellia pinned next to a pale buttoned collar with long, thin points. Tucked into her coat pocket, a red sprig like brain capillaries. Like Mary, she holds her hushed octopus arms close. Over her shoulders, saints glow, wander, and break loose in a north by northeast wind. Gazing between the icons, she locks her tree-light eyes on you. In Kiev is a terrible longing, interminable in its freshness, like the inner bark of trees.
Yeah, beautiful poem. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing it, Craig. And let me pull up, just for everybody, nobody on the Zoom can see it, but I will pull up that painting. I'll see if I can find it, so we can share that too. I think it's this one. Let me see. I think it's this one right here. But yeah, there's just amazing artwork coming out of Ukraine that I wasn't familiar with either. So it was really cool to see. I totally agree. And then, some of the things people have been sharing have just been wonderful. As with that poetry reading from Ukraine that we had, that Julia held on Wednesday or Tuesday last week. It's amazing to see, all the things that you hadn't seen before. So it's interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah, take care. Okay, and now let's go to Ukraine. Then we'll go to Audrey Friedman.
Hello, Tim. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Audrey, how you doing?
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I've got a poem, another Haibun, called Planetary Pull.
Planetary Pull. Okay, and was that I see it here. Planetary Pull. Okay. Let me put it in a Word doc really quick because just because the screen is wrongly sized for sharing. Okay. So is there anything you want to say about it before you read it?
It's one of my favorite forms, and what starts off as something else very often comes to its completion as a Haibun. So looks like I might have to put a manuscript together.
Very cool. Sounds like it. And I think we, Megan just gave me a list of the prompts, and this week's prompt is not, but next week's going to be a Haibun. So we'll have,
I'm ready.
For 2 weeks from now. You got 2 weeks, but don't tell anybody else. It'll be our secret.
Okay.
Okay. But go ahead whenever you're ready with Planetary Pull.
Okay. Planetary Pull. I sat near the foot of her hospital bed, listening to the slow drip of the IV and the incessant beeps from the monitor. My mother was in way worse shape today than all the other days. It was obvious by her labored breaths, obvious by her eyelids that stayed closed, obvious by her lack of reaction to my being there. The hardest part for me was finding words, the poet whose primary medium was words. How can I say I'll miss you when I won't? How can I say I love you when the emotions that I held were oscillating like AC/DC currents? I did love her once, like the moon loves the earth. I willingly stayed in her orbit, tethered. I knew comfort there, but things that are that good often have seasons that end abruptly. Sunflowers, bent heads, heliotropes in prayer never ask questions.
Excellent, Hyman. Thanks so much for sharing that. And there's Audrey Friedman, of course. And yeah, it's a great forum. I always love a good Hyman. So thanks for sharing. Glad you could today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
have a good Sunday.
Yep, you too. Okay, so we'll mute Audrey, and let's go next to Jude Rittenhouse. Hey, Jude.
Hi, Tim. I never hear that.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm so grateful that you've created this community. It really feels like a community, what you've created.
That's right. That's what we always try to do, and the technology just allows you to do it in better and better ways every year.
And you do a marvelous job with that, and I so wish I were young and had the brain that grew up with technology, but you get what you get.
Yeah, well, the Zoom is working great now, so don't worry about that.
So I was going to share the poem that I wrote from this week's news.
Okay.
It's called After Watching Ukrainian Women. After watching Ukrainian women in a park making Molotov cocktails, I read AP and BBC coverage, nuclear threats, flash back to childhood duck and cover drills, distract, find gifts for great nieces due this June and August. Mull yesterday's conference, the history of land ownership. See trajectories. Men come to believe they conceive everything they find, rename, dominate. Thieves destroy beauty they can't see. Ecocide, femicide, genocide. We are born of earth, of women like those birthing in Kyiv bomb shelters. Sea, sky, trees, fungi, co-create, cooperate, self-judicate. Hierarchies rise and logically topple. Conflagration, annihilation. Those babies due this summer. Women of Ukraine desperate to save their homeland. Earth, sky, sea, trees, we spin together like sunflowers spiraling seeds.
Yeah, beautiful poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was after watching Ukrainian women. Great to have you on, and great to see you too.
Thank you.
Okay, so and just a reminder, that that once you share the poem on the open lines, you can go back to YouTube, and then then you're on the chat there, and it's public, and you can see the poem along with it. So once you go, feel free to leave and go back to Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching. Let's see. So we have next. Let's go down to Australia and talk to Andrew Tredinnick. I think he was in Australia, right?
Yep.
Hey,
Hi,
Andrew.
Tim.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, so...
Actually, I don't see. I think your camera's not on, but...
Oh, I know what it is. It's this thing.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah, good to see you again. Yeah.
I interpreted the desk court thing in an interesting way. Like, I looked up the history of it. It goes back to the medieval poets, Virales and so forth. And they talked about having lines that were all different, but they had rhymes.
Oh, did
but
they?
I obeyed your thing about the rhymes. And also Dorianne Locks, in her essay, The Brilliance of the Simple Line, tests discrete lines by reading the poem backwards.
Oh,
so I figure if you read the poem from bottom to top and top to bottom, and it works kind of at least both ways, I thought, hey, that obeys your rule. But I could be completely wrong.
No, I don't know. This is what, like I said to Dick, I think, this prompt, I was very confused by the whole thing. And mine, I had an idea for how to make it all chaotic, and then I just decided to write a regular poem instead.
So I went from less chaos to I figured you could actually have meaning links between the lines. You know what I mean? I tried having a thing that had no meaning links between the lines. I thought that doesn't make sense. Anyway, so let me try it and see what you think.
It's kind of how ironic or how to keep going.
How to keep going. Oh,
okay.
Have I got time for two or?
Yeah, they're both pretty short. You could do both.
All right. Well, how to keep going is sort of modeled on a poem by Barbara Kingsolver. She starts her poem, How to Be Hopeful. Look, you might as well know this device is going to take endless repair, rubber cement, rubber bands, tapioca, the square of the hypotenuse, 19th century novel Sunrise. And she wrote that originally as a graduation speech, like a commencement thing. Anyway, so my kind of modeling on that is this one. Now, I reckon you can tell that this machine always needs fixing. Super glue, gaffer's tape, marmalade, a slide rule or a pocket calculator, some beat poets. Wait for the high tide. You could try all of them. Scissors too. The lids are a challenge. You'll find a ladder can be handy to climb up for a closer look. Drop a plumb line or judge with a spirit level. Level up with your ex while your kids aren't around. Like the mower, it'll start after a few goes. You can run over a buried tap, breaking it off to the hilarity of your family. Running around the garden or running out the door, just not running late. Ride on it if you can, like the neighbours do. If you're running on empty, you might not make it in time. You can leave some beer out for the wild-eyed dogs of day to day to calm them down. Sign up for that subscription. You never know. It could be a good show, or you could take a friend. All in good time. Just give it a go. Too easy.
Yeah, that was good stuff. I don't know. When I hear the poems that you guys are writing, it's making more sense to me. But I don't know. I had a mental block. It wasn't working.
And if you read it backwards, it almost works. I also I need to sort of credit Bruce Coburn for the wild-eyed dogs of day to day. It's a line from one of his songs. And Paddington Bear for the marmalade.
So the other one is how ironic. So is this
how ironic?
Is this a different prompt or what is
what this was literally yesterday. I was sitting in a food court in a shopping mall, and it was just a couple of observations and speculations. Okay. And please forgive me for there's some sensitive stuff in here, but I'm not intending to be. Yeah, I'll just read it.
Okay,
I'll read it. How ironic. She explains, the street thereafter looks to be perpendicular to the one we're in, as they look to the map on his phone. So they set off to meet up later. It seems ironic that they'd use such a technical term for casual directions. Meanwhile, at the food court, another couple. He has a Playboy shirt on, logo on the front, leisure first on the back. Yet he looks kind of non-binary from the hair and makeup. I know you're supposed to say they, but we hadn't met, so I'm not sure. So I guess the shirt might be ironic, maybe post-ironic. And she who's with him signals she with the gorgeous pink top and designer jeans, but maybe that's ironic too. And the jeans definitely don't need ironing either. Then off they go happily shopping. Then I look around in the food court. I see all of humanity is here today. Every continent, every faith, every color, every refugee culture, every subculture, every gender, every age. And that's just in the few dozen people I see nearby. in this otherwise generic shopping mall, which could be anywhere. That seems ironic too.
Really interesting. Yeah, good poem. How ironic, and what
So-
a cool place we live in now that can be the case.
That I'm just struck by the fact that anywhere you go in the world, shopping malls all look the same. But the people, the diversity is just amazing. And even in my little, neck of the woods down here, incredible cultural diversity, and a beautiful thing. Fantastic.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks, Tim, for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, let's go to Nivedita because it's late where she is. I didn't see it on there earlier. Hey,
Hello.
Nivi, how you doing?
Tim, I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. So, so what do you have for us?
I started writing a Discord, and then, like everybody said, it's quite confusing. And then I found some examples where people wrote Discords that actually made sense. I mean, there were words, the lines were not rhyming, they had different meters, they had different number of word counts, but that's all they really cared about. And some places say that's all it is. And some go into more details with strophes and things, but that's a bit too much to do. So I took inspiration from that website, which said, basically a Descott, which according to them was also written by French people in like the early 16th and 17th century, because I think Descott is taken from a French word. And back then when they used to write it, it was chaotic in that it didn't follow a particular pattern. They seem to think that that was the reason it was chaotic, not that it didn't, like each line had to be totally independent. So that's how I construed it. So mine is sort of more built along those lines. Like you read it, it's sort of the entirety of the poem is one thought process, but then each line is sort of a different length, has a different number of words or different syllable count, things like that. So I know we're getting so many interpretations of a Descott that I think ultimately all of this combined together can make one poetry form by itself.
I think so, yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, great. Thank you. Because each poem is different and no two people are alike. I say yes, you no, and they go maybe. Thoughts, my thoughts, I mean, that are too vast to be contained in a book, rush past the clouds in my head, never halting, never considering the lies you speak so freely, easily, and frequently. The thoughts of yours, though, the thoughts so carefully aimed at him, her, them, me, those thoughts are the ones to watch out for, the ones that are too shallow to be even held in a thimble, and that are ever stopping, forever considering the truths that fall, that hurt, that come so easily, freely, and frequently to me. And yet we each are allowed our own thoughts, our own words, and even our own deeds. The blasphemy, gasp. For each word, each of us is different and unique, just as this poem is. Different, I mean.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. So I don't know that I like it when everybody else reads them. I just don't like writing them, apparently. Thanks, Nivi. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Tim. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay. Oops. And let's see. Next, I think I'll read mine and Megan's poems. One thing with the new format on Zoom is I'm never sure when to read ours. But so as you see, this is mine, and I had an idea for how to make it like a meaningfully discordant or something, and then as I was writing it, I was going to have different like sections doing different things and being weird, but then it was annoying, and so I stopped. And so this is mine here. Let's see. So this is first awake on a cold Sunday morning, I missed the newspaper. Flung to the third step by a neighbor boy down the street, and bending there to fetch it for my father, one slippered foot crunching into a bite of overnight snow. I missed the glaze of frost on the pink plastic bag that kept the paper dry, and the dumb weight of it flopping onto the kitchen table like a corpse. Half of it ads and inserts, Radio Shack gadgets, rows of snowblowers at Sears, the happy woman under her red umbrella strolling fashionably to the mall. I miss them all. Those days I cooked my eggs over easy, 2 slices of plain bread lightly toasted, soaking in the golden yolk. I'd set my blue plate set to the side, married to its mug of Folger's coffee, and pick through the sections of the bold headlines and fuzzy photos, politics, sports, next week's weather, all of the world right there in the dusty film on my fingers. A lazy sun hung yellow on the horizon, almost but not quite ready to rise. So that was my newspaper poem. And I thought I'd have like some kind of, like different sections from the newspaper and the ads like popping in, and that's how it was going to be discordant. But then I couldn't figure out where to go with it. So anyway, that's my failure for the week. And this is Megan's. And Megan also mentioned in her, when she emailed the poem, that she failed too. But I don't think so. I think hers is good. And she also mentioned that this is like the 5th time she's written about crows. So she's very crow. There's something about crows going on. This is Crows in the Parking Lot. A scattering of black punctuation across a landscape of rain-dulled gray and cartoon red. Do they remember me? Yes, I am back, buying decorative baskets, jars of almonds, candles that smell like birthday parties, and tourists' luas? I don't know what that is. Wandering windowless aisles in the plastic dream. Crows, mostly I ignore you, because you remind me of miracles. Your frantic hearts, your sudden days of wings, at once biblical and ordinary. I want to think about how this fake plant will distract me from my messy desk and all the things that mess says about me. Not your eyes and how they see things for which there is no language. Forget you saw me, shuffling past with my groaning cart of distraction, blinking in the sun like a cave creature, and I will try to forget you, your primal murmurs, the insistence of your dark rising, eclipsing the red sun. So it was Megan's Discord poem, and none of the lines are similar. Let's see. So let's go next to... I saw some. We have some people who haven't been on before still. So Nancy Walters is here. Let's go to Nancy and ask her to unmute. Oh.
All right.
There you go.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join us. So where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Maine.
Ah, cool.
In the foothills.
Yeah, it's always fun to have a first-time callers on. So what do you have that you would like to share?
Well, my poem is called Little Man Look to Siberia. Mm-hmm. And what I wrote it about was, I mean no disrespect to the people of the Ukraine and the horrors of what's going on there, but I'm writing in the appalling lack of coverage of the UN's report on climate change, which came out this week as well, mm-hmm. and how I continue to be amazed at what little coverage there is about the urgency of climate change. So that's what inspired this piece.
Little Man Look to Siberia. Yeah, go ahead. I'll put this on screen. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay. Putin is bombing Ukraine. Devastation is riveting, horrifying, garners global attention. Media locked on, locked down. Putin's chest swells with pride. He is masterful. Look how everyone watches him. See how they envy his power to kill. If it only a giant hand would reach down from the sky and grab you, tiny dictator, small bad boy, by the scruff of your dirty neck and fling you north to your Siberia, where methane craters dot the permafrost like craters on the moon. Putin, you thought you were so smart, timing your slaughter to smother the UN climate change report, so your oil crown would stay shiny and we would remain beholden. Well, wear it, squeal in Greece while you can, before you choke in the midst of methane bombs. Your own desolate land will show you how it's done. Death much bigger and more final than even you could dream, while the rest of us drive away from your worthless, crude barrels, trying to beat the clock on our silent electric wheels.
Yeah, great poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. Little man looked to Siberia. One of the things that I learned, I know why this hadn't occurred to me, but that Russia's propaganda was like pushing anti-nukes, the anti-nuclear thing in Europe, just because the green stuff relies on natural gas. That's a really strange story. So climate change is definitely tied up into all that's going on as well.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody keeps saying, why now?
Mm-hmm.
Why now? Why is he attacking now? And so in my mind, I thought, he's just the type of person that would be that cynical. Like, oh, it doesn't matter to kill a couple thousand, maybe a couple 100,000 people to keep my oil profits coming, rather than let the news get out that climate change is even worse than we thought.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Nancy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Take care. Okay, let me go next to Stephen Croft.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Stephen. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'd like to read too, if I can. And I'd like to say that for the past week or more, I'm very anxious but also conflicted. I desperately want to help the people in Ukraine. But I'm former Army, and I know people who are heading to Eastern Europe right now.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, the Army, it's an army of soldiers, also an army of acronyms and coded language. There's something called S4, which is logistics in the Army. I live near Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield and in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And in the local media, there was a story of fort to port training, how vehicles will be moved out of Fort Stewart to deploy overseas. And when I deployed to Iraq, I remember seeing an M577 armored personnel carrier, which I was assigned to, being loaded onto a ship to go to Kuwait on the local media. I was in the Army about to go to Iraq, and I thought that may be my vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep seeing that vehicle being loaded now. And I'm conflicted. I do not want this war to spread beyond Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, there's that danger. So the first poem I'd like to read is To a Poet Going to War, if you've got that one.
Yeah. Was it the one that, let's see. Yeah, I see it right here in Misfit Magazine.
Yeah. To a Poet Going to War. Close your heart to what you believe. On the roads, widows, orphans will beg. You will be told to ignore them. Ignore them. No soft kindness will be allowed the redemption of meaning. On the roads, trade a summer tour of Europe, castles, churches, museums, for a new lesson in beauty and architecture. Bombed, gutted, collapsed. In battle, do not ponder what a hope may be worth in the future. There are no moments to go to Innisfree. Trade musing for scarifying witness. In battle, expect to use the F word, its own kind of poetry, as trained movements drive you like a machine. Breathe every sulfur breath of gunpowder as your last. If it is, no world will be made from a moment. Homer's nymphs won't wail your death in stanzas from sea caves. You will not hear the bullet that kills you.
Oh, wow, that's a powerful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Stephen. That ending, Homer's nymphs won't wail your death in stanzas from sea caves. Great stuff. And then you had another one you wanted to share?
I do. And when I thought of this war in Ukraine, I thought of the epic, the Iliad, and I don't remember the title of the essay, but Simone Weil had an essay on the Iliad in which she said unforgiving force is the only and madly venerated hero in the epic. And that was her thesis, in which she went through the essay with. This is called The World's Saddest Song Remains the Same. And I was sort of thinking of the epic, one of our oldest existing poetry texts. The world's song remains the same. And the epigraph, how long must we sing this song? You too. A roadside billboard in my town says, pray for Ukraine, and I want to. In the UN, they give speeches, but Barum, the bombs continue to fall on city buildings. Smoke and flame light up our screens. And we've seen this horror movie before. Correspondents in body armor and helmets counting explosions, cut to rescuers digging rubble, pulling bloodied civilians out onto stretchers, cut to people in chaotic queues on train platforms, children everywhere, some families bringing their dogs. And I want to help them onto the train, give candy to the child, tell the harried conductor he's a good dog, will cause no trouble, but I can't be there. But I can't close my heart to what I see, and I can't look away because I know war. How thoughts travel one day to the next, thinking of death, how waking is just another day of death. Laughter so rare, it is like a shock, like a bomb when you hear it. Your chest so constricted against gloom, you can hardly join in. And I don't want people to die, and I don't want people to live this way, but I can't go and give any real help any more than the foreign ministers and politicians giving speeches. So I will pray for Ukraine. I remember a ruined Russian tank half submerged on a bank of the Kabul River, left there like an open-air museum piece, left there when the Russians withdrew. So I pray for Ukraine, and I pray for the day when every tank in our world is just a left-behind museum piece.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. An important poem, and definitely, I think we all agree here for sure. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to another first-time guest, Neelan Cutney. So I asked Neelan to unmute. We'll see what Neelan has for us.
Hi.
Hey, Neelan, you there? Yeah.
Just to introduce myself quickly, I'm a very recent poet. I'm 79 and recently retired. And a poem I'd like to read for you is really the first poem that I started writing. It is poetry. I had posted it on Facebook and got some very good comments from some friends of mine. But it's called The Other America, Parts 1 and Parts 2. And it relates to the thoughts I had about 4 months before I did fully retire from my job as a construction inspector. I thought it was time to stop climbing around on top of steel buildings, towers, and various different things. So at any rate, it's called The Other America. There's no particular reason for that title except it starts off in South America. But it's made up of 4 stanzas of 9 lines each. So in between each stanza, I'll just use the word next to let you know when 9 lines have passed by.
Okay. Let me try to find the poem really quick.
I haven't sent it to you.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No, I can show it to you on the screen, and I plan to. I actually planned to send this one out first, but I managed to send other things first, including the poem called "The Congress Ark" that you saw sometime this last week. It was a recent poem.
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and read this one then?
Okay, this one here, "The Other America," first stanza. I wish to climb a mountain in Chile or Peru, and when I'm at the top, I wish to play and sing a song that's just for you. For when I reach the highest peak, the winds will cease to blow, and in the silence surrounding me, the notes will surely grow. Next. But notes just die in silence, as down the slopes they flow, and when they reach the bottom, the silence will remain, and when the notes have died away, we'll have a wait for all of them and climb back up again. Don't fret, more notes, I've got them. That's the end of the second stanza, and now we're in part 2, The Other America. I can't say, alas, I'm old, although now at 78, I have enough youth for something bold, but not to challenge fate. With now more wisdom than with fear, sotto voce, my mind is certain you won't climb a mountain, not now, not ever, and certainly not this year. Next. But yet the notes still grow and fall into song and dance, and as voice and instruments still flow, and though you may look askance, I will walk up and down hills, walk but slow, along the wooded trails but sure, at Hampton Roads and Chesapeake Shore, so still the thirst for music and life, yes, not less, but more. And that's the end of that poem.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I'm going to cut to another guest. We got a lot of people to get through. Thanks so much for joining us, Neil.
Sure.
Okay, so let me see. Next, we should go to Sharon Ferrante. Hey, Sharon, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. Great show. Thank you again so much.
Yeah.
And my heart is pounding with all these poems.
Yeah, really good stuff all around. I'm trying to, let's see, add. No. Oh, because I'm just still learning how to use. There we go.
Okay.
I'm still learning how to use Zoom. There's different buttons. Okay, so we're back with you. So what do you have to share with us?
I have a desk work poem,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been writing very silly and light, and that's how lately I just need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So this fit beautifully. It was just silly and light.
Perfect. So let me pull it up.
Yeah, I don't have it titled.
Okay. Here it is. Poem. Okay. Desk-court poem. Interesting. This is an interesting layout. I like this.
It was fun. I need that right now.
Yeah. I think we all do.
Yeah.
So go ahead whenever you're ready.
The French kiss, a haunted house. Every corridor has a slimy ghost with no wayfinding. Wonderful. As I search my way around, I become a lizard, a bit green, a footman, in some wet fairy tale where I go too far and choke you by midnight.
Very interesting. Good poem. I like that. Thanks for sharing that, Sharon.
Fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Let's go next to, I have to figure out this remove spotlight. There we go. Okay. And now I can just go to ask Mike Bales to unmute.
Yeah. Good poems. The featured poet, I especially liked her last poem.
Yeah.
So she'd be someone to follow.
For sure. Yeah. Good to see you, Mike. How you doing today?
Pretty good. It was warm earlier, so it was cold today, so I'm getting used to that. Hard. We actually had tornadoes in Iowa, which I guess it's March. I guess you can have tornadoes then.
Yeah, it's still frightening, for sure.
I think the climate's going crazy. What was it? Someone was talking about like Colorado or somewhere where it was like 71 day. Oh, in Missouri, I think it was someone on here, then like a foot of snow the next day. It's getting
Yeah,
crazy.
well, even here it was 60, you know, like 1 minute and then snowing the next.
Yeah, I wrote some Discord poems. Maybe I could read one next week. I read it to a critique group and they said maybe that's my form. It can change, you know, like sometimes I'm good at guzzles and, you know, like today, if I tried to write a guzzle, it'd be really hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least forms come to me here and there. I'm still trying to put a human face in the war.
Mm-hmm.
So this I sent to Poets Respond. You'd have it in Submittable.
Yeah, let me pull it up. Okay, this is Crossing Borders.
Crossing Borders. Someone said, try a poem backwards. I'm debating now whether it's better forwards or backwards. I'll read it forwards because that's the way I gave it to you.
Sounds good.
Crossing Borders. A mother says to her daughter, the skies have fallen. They sit together in a tent across the border from homelands they love. Fathers stay home to fight. A sullen sky lingers above a makeshift camp. Mothers and children wander. Fathers stay home to fight. Blankets are given to stave off winter. Food and water, aid and supplies. Fathers stay home to fight. Broken families and broken dreams. They're villagers at heart, torn apart by war. Fathers stay home to fight. Clouds veil skies, uncertain fortunes, a change of weather. Fathers stay home to fight. A mother says to her daughter, the skies have fallen.
Excellent. Yeah, you could read that backwards. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real debate now. One thing I like about the forward thing, I kind of like torn apart by war, I like it kind of closer to the end than to the beginning, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's always something to debate.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for sharing that, Mike. I'm looking forward to your Discord poem next week.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll go to YouTube.
Okay, take care. I think, let's see, we have Guy Chambers and Bev Atherstone left. Let's go to Guy.
Hello, Tim. How's it going today?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, I had a little hard time figuring out how to break this poem here and that. So, but
I know
this is what I came up.
It's
still a challenge. Yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge here, and I like your Zoom. Everything was pretty good. Last week it took me by surprise. I was sitting there Zoomed, and I didn't have my shave. I didn't have my hair combed or anything. But I enjoy it too. But this poem here, I came up with it just last night there. So I call it Hem.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit after here. Dog-eared to the distant hearing. Mice blind voice beneath strained ears within an unspoken meadow. As to time, echoes, him inward, tether to keep to oneself. That's mostly for people who just never get a chance to say anything. You know, they're always getting pushed aside, so I just keep it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple other poems. I don't know if you want me to have time to read them.
Yeah, go ahead. They're short. Feel free.
Yeah. I call these micro poems, and like I say in my book, Flying Kites in the Movie, I got a whole section of these small poems. I like writing them and that too. So my first one is called Eyes. Glance into the mirror. Stare into the eyes. That's where the beauty really lies.
Oh, excellent. I like that.
People,
yeah,
everybody should look into themselves first. You know, that what's inside it makes a difference. On this last one here, maybe it's for what it's this time here. It's called Peace. Imagine the dream. That's for the late John Lennon and Martin Luther King. Of course, John Lennon with his song Imagine, and of course, Martin Luther King, The Dream. You know, he always still one of the best speeches I ever heard. I was very young when that came out, and I think it's still powerful.
Yeah, it definitely is a great poem for this time right now. Very good micro poem. Thanks for sharing those, Guy.
Thank you very much.
Yep, take care. Okay, and then last but not least, for sure, is Bev Wendell Atherstone. Let's get Bev on the line here. Hey,
hi,
Bev.
Tim.
How you doing today?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Sorry for having you wait. I'm trying to go like the reverse order every week, but it's hard to remember.
I have two poems for you today.
Okay, cool. And let's. So what are they?
Okay, so the first one is Poets Respond.
Okay, let me pull up. So we have the Vanishing Apex Predators as well, or is that old?
No, that's an old one.
Okay, let me. Oh, here we go. Poem for March 6th. And then I'll get the Poet Respond one ready too.
Now I've got the Ukraine farewell.
Okay, let me try to find this. So is there anything you want to say about the Poet Respond poem before you read?
I want to say all the poems today were just magnificent, and thank you to the Poets Respond poems. This is simply, I think all of us are having great empathy for what's going on in the Ukraine. So this is my response. Crying wives at Poland's borders. Will they see their men again? Crying husbands return to Ukraine, resolved their homeland to regain. Crying Russian soldiers dying, surprised to meet resistance strong. Crying duped, a war of lying, fueled by Putin's insistent wrong. Crying all as yet another tiny man, megalomaniac, holds us, crying that we haven't curbed his plan by rendering his power inactive. Crying, we who watch the news, impotent, we can't stop this badness. Crying world from all its corners, crying for this carnage, crying for this madness.
Yeah, good refrain there. Powerful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Bev. And then, and you have another poem. The other one's really short, right? Just a 4-line.
It's just very short. It was my attempt at the prompt. So I didn't understand we were supposed to have it not make sense. I just thought we were supposed to not rhyme it.
Yeah, I don't know what. I don't know. I'm still confused.
Okay, so this is what I came up with. And it's hard not to rhyme or have lines that have the same rhythm when you're used to that.
It is. I know. It really is. Let me get this in a Word doc just so we can get it on the screen right. Here we go. Okay. Go ahead.
Ukraine, farewell. He looks back one last time as his wife and son board the bus. He leaves them in Poland as he feels compelled to return and join other husbands and fathers to fight for their besieged land.
Yeah.
She views a foreign landscape, hoping to never call it home.
Excellent. Thanks, Bev. Sorry for cutting you off. I just couldn't. I didn't have it up, so I didn't know how where it was. I was looking at Home Advantage instead, so I was a little off. But thanks for sharing that. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, you should have listened to the intro.
Okay, so that is the end of the open line segment. Thanks everybody for joining in. Going to end this Zoom call here, and let's see. So that was just wonderful. Though once again, the Skype works really well, and we had some great poems. Great guests today with Kashiana Singh and Kim Stafford. Brian Beatty was here. It was good stuff. So thanks everybody for joining us and for sharing your poems on the open lines. It's just always fun to do this. Now I'm going to do the Sciku really quickly. And if you remember the last week's episode, was it last week or was that more than last week? Roberta Beery was talking about, well, a little bit we were talking about the experimental haiku that seemed to be kind of popular as a subgenre of the subgenre of haiku poets. So I wrote a experimental haiku about this news story, which is really interesting. If you kind of think about what's going on, let me try to clear up the clutter here. Okay, so if you look at if you read this thing and think about what's going on, this is solar illusion. Coronal loops may not be what they seem. So if you're watching, I guess everybody's watching now. These are coronal loops, where they're these magnetic fields that sort of pop out of the sun. And what these researchers at UCAR found was that these things, which we used to think were magnetic, and so much of solar research has been based on studying these and the way that they move through the solar atmosphere. It turns out that these are nothing but an optical illusion, and most of these solar arches or solar loops are actually just the layers of plasma sort of sheeting on top of each other and folding to give the illusion of a loop, which makes sense because the loops never behave the way we thought they would if they were magnetic. So anyway, it's a very strange article. So decades of solar research, if this theory is true, turns out to be based on something that's a complete assumption that was completely wrong. And so that's very, very strange and interesting. And it sort of shows a little bit of our hubris. Like, we saw these things, these loops, and we thought that they were the magnetic loops we would expect. We didn't think at all about them being folds in a plasma sheet. And so what was interesting, too, is that they called this, it was a study based on modeling, and they called the modeling a product. So I was thinking about that when I wrote this little experimental Sciku, which is right here. Shoplifting the veil. Shoplifting the veil. So I don't even know if anybody gets that. It might be too esoteric, but it's a fun and interesting little experimental Sciku. And now your prompt for this week is to write a poem about one of the 7 wonders of the world. Great Pyramid of Giza, Colossus of Rhodes, Hanging Gardens of Babylon, Lighthouse of Alexandria, Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, Statue of Zeus at Olympia, Temple of Artemis. This is the classic list. Feel free to use an updated list that includes different wonders. So write about a wonder of the world. That is your prompt for this week. And next week's guest is going to be Kevin Clark. Now, Kevin Clark is just a great poet we published a few times. He has a new book, The Consecrations, also a baseball player. So it's kind of a fun or maybe sad poet to talk to as the winter winds down and baseball season is not starting because of lockout issues. But it's going to be interesting to talk to Kevin Clark. The Consecrations is his new book. That is the guest for Rattlecast number 135. Next Sunday, the regular time, March 13th, noon Eastern time. Like always, hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.